The text messages didn't sound like her. They were short, strange, and unsettling. By the time her family realized something was horribly wrong, it was too late. This is the story of Sophie Carter, a woman who tried to break free from her ex but instead lost her life to his dangerous obsession. Sophie Carter was a 29-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative with a promising career, a new condo, and a future full of possibilities. But her bright life came to a tragic end when her ex-boyfriend, Adrian Blackwell, a man who seemed to have it all, revealed his true, terrifying nature. What started as a whirlwind romance spiraled into a chilling series of events that left a family shattered and a community searching for answers. How could a successful, independent woman's life end so tragically? And what dark secrets was Adrian hiding all along? Sophie grew up in the leafy suburbs of Portland, Oregon. As the eldest of three, her siblings often looked up to her not just because she was the first to excel, but because she made everything seem possible. Her parents would often joke that Sophie wasn't just ambitious, she was unstoppable. Teachers adored her sharp mind. Friends treasured her loyalty. She wasn't just determined, she was magnetic. By 29, Sophie had built the kind of life others admired. She had just bought her dream condo in the heart of the city, a modern, sun-drenched space with sleek furniture and a view that spoke of success. At work, Sophie was a powerhouse. As a pharmaceutical sales representative, she had a gift for persuasion. Clients trusted her, managers valued her, and teammates leaned on her. To her family, she was their glue, the one who remembered every birthday, brought everyone together during the holidays, and made sure no one ever felt alone. But beneath that bright surface, there was something brewing, something dark that Sophie couldn't have foreseen. Adrian Blackwell grew up in Chicago, surrounded by wealth and privilege. His parents, a high-powered attorney and a glamorous socialite, cared more about appearances than their family. Behind closed doors, their home was cold and full of arguments. Adrian learned early on how to keep up a good front even when everything was falling apart. By adulthood, he had mastered the art of looking successful. He drove flashy cars, wore designer suits, and told anyone who'd listen that he was a big-shot real estate investor. People were drawn to his confidence and charm. But behind that polished exterior was a man whose success was built on lies. Adrian wasn't an entrepreneur. He was a con artist with a criminal record full of scams, unpaid debts, and stories of women he had hurt both emotionally and physically. And when someone figured him out, Adrian didn't just walk away. He retaliated. In late 2020, Adrian met Sophie at a networking event. He walked in looking sharp in a gray suit and immediately turned heads. Sophie was smart, driven, and successful in her own right, and Adrian seemed like her equal, a man who shared her ambition. At first, he was everything she could have hoped for. He took her to the best restaurants, told her stories about his deals, and made her feel like the center of his world. Then he introduced her to his version of the good life, making her believe they were building something real. But as the months went by, things started to feel off. Adrian's stories about his business were vague, his explanations didn't quite make sense, and he had a way of dodging her questions. Sophie started paying closer attention, and that's when she noticed his temper. At first it was subtle, snide remarks or cold glares. But soon his anger started to show in ways that made her uncomfortable. Then things got worse. By early 2021, Sophie had seen enough. She confronted Adrian, determined to get the truth. She started asking the right questions and digging into his past, and when she started pulling on the threads, the lies unraveled fast. The penthouse he bragged about, rented, the luxury cars, leased under someone else's name. And the worst part? Adrian had a criminal record including fraud, financial scams, and even a restraining order filed by a former girlfriend. This wasn't just about his lies. Sophie realized Adrian was a man who thrived on control, and she had unknowingly been caught in his web. So Sophie made a decision. She broke things off and told Adrian she didn't want anything to do with him. For her, it was about reclaiming her life and putting the past behind her. Then she focused on moving forward, leaning on her friends and family for support. But for Adrian, it wasn't that simple. He didn't see Sophie as a person he had wronged. He saw her as a threat, someone who could expose him, ruin his carefully crafted image. And that, to Adrian, was unforgivable. What started as a whirlwind romance had now turned into something dangerous. Adrian wasn't just angry about losing Sophie. He was obsessed with the idea of controlling her no matter what it took. So while Sophie thought she was free, Adrian was already planning his next move. At first it started with angry texts, accusations that Sophie had ruined his life. She ignored him, hoping he'd eventually lose interest. Then the messages turned darker. Adrian began sending threatening emails. His words dripped with venom. Soon Sophie started receiving voicemails that made her blood run cold. In one of them his voice was low, almost calm. "You'll regret leaving me. "You won't escape." There was no shouting, just a terrifying promise. Sophie confided in her friends, hoping they'd help her figure out what to do next. Even with their support, the fear was creeping in. She contacted the police to find out how to get a restraining order, but hesitated to file it immediately, unsure if it would make Adrian angrier. She shared her passwords with close friends, just in case something happens. Sophie wasn't the kind of person to let fear control her, but this was different. Adrian wasn't just angry. He was obsessed. On the morning of September 12, 2022, Sophie sent a casual email to her new boyfriend, Mark Reynolds, letting him know she was taking a personal day. It was nothing out of the ordinary, so Mark didn't think much of it when Sophie didn't immediately respond to his later messages. But as the hours passed, the silence became unsettling. Sophie was the kind of person who always answered her phone no matter how busy she was. By the afternoon, her friends and family were also trying to reach her. Calls went unanswered. Texts left unread. Then, as evening fell, something strange happened. Messages started coming from Sophie's phone. At first, they were short and vague, claiming she was out with friends and would call later. But the tone didn't sound like Sophie. Her friends noticed it right away. She was never this cryptic, never this detached. Something wasn't right. 3 days later, Sophie's car was found abandoned in a parking lot on the outskirts of the city. It was parked neatly, as though nothing was wrong, but inside told a different story. The interior had been wiped clean, almost too clean, like someone had something to hide. But they missed something small. Traces of blood were found on the floor mat, faint but unmistakable. Sophie's family and friends were now consumed with dread. 9 days after Sophie Carter vanished, the search came to a devastating end. Acting on a tip about a suspicious area near Adrian's family property, officers scoured the dense woods nearby. At first, it seemed like just another lead, but as they pushed deeper into the trees, something caught their attention. A patch of disturbed earth just barely concealed beneath the undergrowth. The officers began digging. Then they found her. Sophie's body was carefully buried, as if someone had gone to great lengths to hide what they had done. The medical examiner would later confirm she had been strangled, and her injuries showed signs of a violent struggle. Sophie had fought back but hadn't been able to escape. The discovery sent shockwaves through her family. The hope they had clung to for 9 agonizing days was gone in an instant. But even in their grief, Sophie's family found resolve. This wasn't just about mourning their loss. It was about making sure the person responsible was held accountable. The trial began with Adrian Blackwell's arrest, just days after Sophie's body was found. Police executed a search warrant on Adrian's apartment and discovered Sophie's laptop and phone with their device names changed, damning evidence. Adrian insisted he was innocent, claiming police were framing him. His calm, calculated responses made it clear he believed he could talk his way out of this, just like so many times before. But the case against him was overwhelming. Surveillance footage showed him entering Sophie's building with her on the day she disappeared, and leaving alone hours later carrying a large bag. Phone records placed him at her condo during the critical hours she was last seen. Witnesses testified to seeing him lurking around her building in the days leading up to her disappearance. Several ex-girlfriends took the stand and recounted their experiences with him: manipulation, lies, and a temper that turned violent when he didn't get his way. Their stories were chilling echoes of what Sophie had endured. The trial lasted 2 weeks. When the jury finally went to deliberate, it took them just under 3 hours to reach a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Adrian showed no visible reaction, but for Sophie's family, it was a moment of bittersweet relief. Justice had been served, though it could never bring Sophie back. At his sentencing, the judge described Adrian as a cold, calculating predator and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Sophie's loved ones, it was the end of a harrowing chapter, but not the end of their grief. They left the courtroom with heavy hearts, knowing that while justice had been served, the hole left by Sophie's absence would never truly heal. Still, they carried her memory forward, vowing to honor her life and ensure her story would serve as a warning to others. Sophie Carter's life was a beacon of love, ambition, and resilience. Her friends describe her as someone who lit up every room she entered. Her family speaks of her as the glue that held them together. Sophie wasn't just a daughter, a sister, or a friend. She was a force of nature. Her tragic death doesn't define her, but it does serve as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can arise from toxic relationships and unchecked obsession. Her bravery in standing up for herself and trying to break free should never have led to such a devastating end. If there's one message to take from Sophie's story, it's this: love should never come at the cost of safety. No relationship, no matter how promising it seems, is worth your peace of mind or your life. If you or someone you know is facing a situation that feels dangerous, don't wait. Seek help. Reach out to someone you trust or contact resources designed to protect you before it's too late. As we close this chapter of Sophie's story, Let her memory inspire us to act, to be vigilant, to support one another, and to ensure that no one else becomes a victim of the same kind of obsession that took her life. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.